Hey, welcome back to the channel. All right, I've got some good news for you. I know Nebula already had a fan base. I think you guys are going to like this update. I think you're going to like this update, and I'm just going to start it off. It's not even listed in here. Both her block proficiency and her armor have been upgraded. It is not clear exactly how much, but Kabam was aware of the problem, and both of those have been improved. Well, I think we'll have to wait till she comes into the game till we see exactly how much. But I also think, and we're going to go through this, I think some of her playstyle is going to alleviate some of what was that problem. Also, I have highlighted what I think is important, and we'll briefly talk about what is different, again, if it's important, but I'm more interested in where she is going to go than where she was in the game or currently is, right? All right, so here's the story of Nebula, and let's get right into it. I've intentionally highlighted the word shock, and energy damage, because that is what she is about. That's what she's going to be doing. And then I wanted to highlight this AMP or amp charges. That's new mechanic that she's going to have, but it also still retains the ability to lower robots' ability accuracy. That is a big deal. Strengths makes a lot of sense. Someone where you're wanting to do a lot of energy damage, or of course a robot counter. And then weaknesses, if the defender is immune to shock, she's not going to work out so well for you. This is a very cool change. She is now fully immune to shock. It makes a lot of sense to me. I like it. I really love it. I love champions. This is like Warlock with that additional. It's not just bleeding poison. There's something else. So that is really cool. I think that's a good thing. She now has 3 of the indefinite self-repair charges. That's really nice. I still think this maintains a relatively defensive sort of ability. But if you're trying to get those amp charges going and you take a heavy, this might kick in. And so it's not a nothing. It's not a nothing. And then unless otherwise stated, her Shakti buffs will be doing this 1096 over 6 seconds. There is one I've highlighted where it is different. We now have these AMP charges. She's going to build them up every 0.65, which is a big reduction. They used to be, I think it was every 0.9 seconds, 0.9 seconds. So that is a significant reduction. These should be easier to build up. And then also you're going to be able to get them anytime of immunity prevents a shock on Nebula. So if someone's trying to land shocks or nodes are landing shocks, this is going to be really nice. Each one of them will reduce the opponent's ability actually by 20% if they are a robot. That is really cool. That is a really cool thing. We've seen that come into use quite a bit, shutting down a robot. Then if you perform a well-timed block, you can convert all these amp charges into shock debuffs on the opponent. So this mechanic is still feeling very similar. It should feel very familiar to everyone. You can land a shock debuff with a heavy attack, and this is important here. The developers note. They try to land a heavy counter to the opponent whenever they can to make sure her signature ability is on at all times and to juice out some extra damage while building my charges. Curious, right? Let's go ahead and jump all the way to the SIG ability now, and then we'll come back. So this way you can understand what's going on here and why that is being pointed out already. Shock debuffs. While the opponent is suffering from at least one shock debuff, Nebula's attack gains 25% combat rate. So if the opponent has one shock debuff on him, and you can land that via the heavy, that's where they're talking about this. And you don't want to parry because then you're going to use all your amp charges. So this is about retaliating. There's going to be a little bit of skill involved here. But when you're able to do that, you're going to land one of these shock debuffs, and then your combat power rate, so from hitting the opponent, is going to gain power 25% faster. Why is that important? Well, you can see extra power means more special attacks, race at SB2 or that race at SB3. Now let's go ahead and scroll back up so we can see why is this a big deal. Special 1 attack still has a 100% chance to inflict a power lock debuff lasting 1 second per shock debuff. So if you got a lot of shocks, that is a very long power lock. That sounds pretty nice to me. And then 100% chance to inflict a power drain, depleting 12% of a bar power per shock. So again, the more shocks you have, the more powerful it's going to be. That sounds pretty lengthy. I also feel like you might be able to set this up, and we'll talk about that as we go. The special 2, Shock and Awe, cool name for it. And they make a point to say, there's still huge damage off the SB2s. Tried and true. Thank you for not changing something that everyone loved about a champion. Very cool. And then this is where it's pointed out. We said the standard default numbers for the shock damage before, but this is where it's pointed out differently. This is now almost 2,000 energy damage over 3 seconds. For each shock, so what it's going to do is Nebula will remove all shock effects on the opponent. For each shock removed this way, she inflicts the SB2 or 2 shock debuffs, each dealing this large number. So there's still that similar mechanic. You parry, and then that's going to put all your amp charges on as shocks. You land the SP2, it will remove them, and then add 2 for each one it's removed, and it's going to be these significantly larger numbers. Now, keep in mind that combat power rate, right? We talked about that. The special 3 here, I think this is where this really comes into play and why they're talking about this. She's going to still gain this weapons overcharge, but this time it's going to last for 25 seconds. While it's active, she has a 65% chance to gain an amp charge. So she's going to be gaining these amp charges when making contact with the opponent. So you're not going to be having to hold your block and charge them up that way anymore. And then while active, any contact with the opponent has a 70% chance to inflict a shock debuff. So I really see a strategy here of landing a shock somewhere in there, especially with your heavy. If you're feeling like you can't sit there and block, you're just worried about it's not working out well, you're worried you're taking too much damage, something to this effect, you race to your SP3, you're going to have a plus 25% combat power rate because of that shock on the defender. You're going to get to your special 3, and then you're going to have this 25 seconds of some serious shocks being applied. And you're going to get your amps going too, which then feels like you can move into that SP1, probably apply that for a really long power lock if that's what you want to do, or go to your SP2 for that massive damage. So it feels like there's significant more versatility in how to play her and take advantage of the things she can do. I'm legitimately pretty excited about this. I know that on the thumbnail I'm going to say and advice. My advice is pretty typical. If you've seen this from me, is I think there's some potential ways to play her there, right? If you feel like you're going to need those sorts of damage, you go to that SP3, or if you're concerned about damage you can take from holding block, you want to go to that SP3. Otherwise, you probably still can go to your SP2, use that in the fight. Those immunities seem really cool to me, but as always, unless you just love this champion and you don't care, wait to see what they're like in game. Here are the synergies. Nothing that stood out to me as just being, this amazing thing that you really want to do, or game changing for the champions that are listed. And then recall, these are all the ones that are just native to her. They're going to still be the ones that are coming from the other champions like Proxima and things like that you'll be very excited to use. I think this is going to be a good champion. I think she already was a very usable champion that some people enjoyed using more and more than others. So I think we're seeing some real nice benefits, and it feels like a lot of what was her quote-unquote problems or reasons people did not want to use her may have been alleviated here. I'm very excited to test this out. Let me know, what you think. Did I miss anything? Did I get this right? And if you already used her, are you excited about this? Thank you so much for watching. Take care. I hope you either learned something, were entertained, or even better, a little bit of both. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.